Some places should be left untouched, some secrets buried. But what happens when curiosity pulls you too close to the abyss? What happens when the things we fear most step into the light? Tonight, you'll hear a story so chilling, so unrelenting, it will haunt your thoughts long after the screen goes dark. This is no mere tale. This is a warning. The year was 2015 when Emily inherited the house. It stood on a lonely hill, a crumbling relic of another era. They called it the House of Mirrors. Every room had at least one, ancient, ornate, and deeply unsettling. The locals whispered of strange events, but Emily dismissed it as superstition. That was her first mistake. The first night in the house, Emily invited me to stay over. The air inside was thick, suffocating, like something unseen was pressing down on us. The mirrors seemed to shift when you weren't looking, their reflections ever so slightly wrong. But we told ourselves it was just our imagination. At midnight, the tapping began. It came from the largest mirror in the hallway. A grotesque piece with intricate carvings of screaming faces along the frame. The sound was faint at first, like a single fingernail rapping against the glass. By the time we approached, it had grown into a frantic pounding. We froze, watching in horror as faint breath marks appeared on the surface, spelling out one chilling word: leave. The next morning, we found a journal in the attic. Emily's uncle's final, desperate words. It detailed years of torment, his growing paranoia as he claimed the mirrors were watching him. He spoke of a ritual, a way to trap something inside the glass. But he warned that the entity was clever, that it might find a way out if the mirrors were disturbed. Emily was skeptical, but I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. That night, the tapping returned, louder and more aggressive. We covered the mirror with a sheet, but the house seemed to come alive in protest. Lights flickered, the walls groaned, and that guttural growl returned, echoing through the empty halls. And then we saw it. The sheet had slipped from the mirror. A hand was reaching through the glass, its claws glinting in the dim light. The air grew colder as the figure emerged, its twisted body and hollow, black eyes fixed on us. Emily screamed, clutching the journal and flipping through its pages for answers. "It needs a sacrifice," she whispered. "That's the only way." The entity stepped closer, its movements unnaturally jerky, like a puppet on broken strings. Emily didn't hesitate. She began chanting the incantation scrawled in her uncle's journal. The creature lunged for her, its claws slicing through the air. But Emily stood firm, her voice growing louder, more commanding. There was a blinding flash of light as the ritual reached its climax. The creature let out a blood-curdling scream, and then it was gone. The mirror shattered, shards of glass scattering across the floor. But Emily, she was gone too. I stumbled out of the house, leaving the cursed place behind. For weeks, I couldn't shake the memories of that night. Sleep was elusive, haunted by images of Emily and the monstrous figure that had emerged from the mirror. I tried to convince myself it was over, that the house and its horrors were behind me. But strange things began happening. At first, it was small. My reflection would linger a second too long, or I'd catch movement in the corner of my eye. Then came the tapping. It started faint, like it had in the house. But each night, it grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't long before I realized the entity hadn't been destroyed. It had followed me. Desperate for answers, I delved into research about the house and the mirrors. I discovered a disturbing pattern: stories of disappearances, unexplained deaths, and a legacy of fear stretching back centuries. The house was a nexus, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. The mirrors were not just objects, they were portals. I returned to the house, determined to end this nightmare once and for all. Armed with the journal and what little knowledge I'd gathered, I prepared for a final confrontation. The house was in worse shape than before, its walls cracked and its windows shattered. Yet the air inside was as heavy as ever, charged with an otherworldly energy. The mirrors were still there, untouched, their surfaces shimmered faintly, as if alive. I set up a circle of protection, using the symbols and incantations from the journal. The air grew colder, and the tapping began, louder and more aggressive than ever before. The entity was coming. When it emerged, it was more terrifying than I remembered. Its body twisted and shifted, as though it couldn't fully maintain its form. It lunged at me, but the circle held. I began the incantation, my voice trembling but resolute. The creature howled, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. As the ritual progressed, the mirrors around me began to crack. The entity thrashed, its foam flickering like a dying flame. It reached for me, its claws just inches from my face. But I didn't stop. The words flowed from my lips, growing stronger with each passing second. The circle glowed, a brilliant light that forced the entity back. With one final desperate scream, the creature was pulled into the largest mirror. The glass shattered, and the house began to collapse. I barely escaped, running into the night as the structure crumbled behind me. The house is gone, but the memory lingers. I've moved far away, yet the feeling of being watched never truly left. Mirrors still unsettle me, their surfaces holding secrets I'd rather not uncover. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear it again, that faint, relentless tapping. The screen fades to black, and the sound of faint tapping echoes, growing louder before abruptly stopping. A single chilling phrase appears on the screen. It watches from the glass,